My name is Chenta Laury, and I'm a visual artist and teacher. I work primarily with wool and silk fibers, but I've also been working with kappa over the last several years as well.
Yeah, and I'm Medeiros, Dr. Art Medeiros. I'm a biologist here on Maui and a collaborator with Chenta on her work. Well, I worked for probably 4 decades, and what people may not know is that native plants, almost like native culture, are endangered. Not only native plants, but insects and birds and everything that go with them are on the edge. They say the edge of extinction, not being here tomorrow. Well, that's the truth with native plants. And so I've kind of worked my life in not only the study, but in maybe doing some CPR on the aloha and the relationship between plants and people.
As a result of our work together, I created 2 pieces, and one is made through a felting process. I hand felted it. It's this piece here. And felting is technically the matting together of fibers. It's the most ancient fiber craft form that we know of. There are examples of felted materials that date back to 6500 BC. And the reason is that it doesn't require any tools. It's just moisture and friction that causes the fibers, wool fibers in particular, to mat together. I've used 2 techniques. The wet felting technique I used for the background as the base fabric, and then I've used a dry felting technique, which is a much more recent process because it uses a tool. It uses what's called a felting needle, which are barbed needles, so they have the point at the end of the needle, but then there's also barbs coming off of the needle that go in the opposite direction. So when you poke the fiber, some wool fiber, into a base fiber, a base cloth, the fibers are pushed down and then other fibers are brought up. So it causes the wool to adhere to itself. So the background is all wet felted, and then the detail of the figure and the color leaves are needle felted. Felting needle allows you to have a lot of control, so I'm basically drawing with the wool. What's nice about it is that it is inherently 3-dimensional, so I can, it's different from the drawing where it's the illusion of shapes overlapping. I can actually just overlap one leaf with the next or the next colors, and then I can push it down. I can allow for a lot of relief or not so much relief, depending on how I want the final effect to look. I'm very drawn to textures, and there's a warmth and an intimacy that I feel I can achieve with the wool. However, I don't usually work figuratively, and I found it very challenging to work as I was working figuratively here. I thought, oh, it'd be so much easier to just paint this, it'd be so much faster. But it was a good challenge in the way that, as artists, we don't always set up challenges for ourselves to push us, and so I really appreciated this opportunity to push in that way.
Yeah, I worked as a biologist with the federal government for 35 years before I retired to work as program manager for the Hawai'i project, because I hadn't seen a project where native forest was responding so well to protection efforts, restoration efforts. It was a forest that was pretty much the walking dead. And we did things, and the forest kind of came back to life progressively. I think you can feel the power of nature, first of all, which I don't know why, but it seems that maybe it's because you're helping nature, but there's something about an immediacy there. And there's also about a group of people gathering to do good things in the mountains. I don't know why, it's very powerful. So I've been doing it for decades now, and it is this idea, if you ask me, of what she's captured here, this idea of, I see this all the time with people looking at nature and saying, wow. Sometimes I say, oh, it's an antidote for email, because it's so quiet, and it's so beautiful, and it's so almost to me like art, or like we imagine God to be. So I think it enriches our life, and so some people say, oh, we're saving it, but I'm not sure we're saving it. There might be some mutual saving going on.
I came with all these ideas that I thought I would expand on through working with Art and talking to him. But really, it was about this very intimate connection between the individual human spirit and the work with the earth. that I was trying to capture in this piece.
For me, it is humbling that these ancient trees are some of the most ancient organisms on the island, right? I mean, they're all standing, they all saw Hawaiians, native Hawaiians that had never known Europeans walk under them, you know, and they saw the passing of European ships. They saw the changes. They're the last survivors of old Maui, and people thought they're like fossils that can't be brought back. And so the idea of kind of building a house around them and having the babies come back, well, that's super exciting for me as a biologist, but to me it's actually not as exciting as seeing people care, because I know that I'm going to pass away, and because I'm going to pass away, I won't be able to protect the forest anymore, and somebody has to. And so seeing this thing happen, I mean, right now this is a cultural thing, but culture is the same way. There kind of has to be a kind of a cultural reignition. When you look at good art, you say, wow. And that's the way I feel in forests, except that it's a big wow because it surrounds you. You know, Chenta and I are similar people, right? And Chenta's an artist and she works with wool. I could have worked with wool. I work with plants, and I went on a different voyage of familiarity with the plants, and when you develop familiarity, you want to protect them. And so our work kind of comes together, but I think both like the same thing. We're both trying to protect things that are Hawaiian, that are unique. We don't want everything to be swept away so rapidly by culture. I mean, by these cultural changes. So it's a little bit of that. And then I think there's a little bit with Chenta, for me, there's a capturing of her inner spirit. And maybe that's kind of what Hawai'i is all about too. But there's a kind of a putting of something special here.
The relationship between identity and place is important to me, and I've been exploring it. And I think that even though neither of us are Hawaiian, the values of a place are live deeply in us, and I think in anyone, depending on where you grow up. And so, you know, I think of these three important Hawaiian values of malama ikaina, which is what this is titled, caring for the land, caring for the place, a concern about leaving whatever you do, how it affects the next generation, as Art just spoke about, wanting to be sure, like after he passes, he's thinking about those who come after. Through my visit to Auahi, it became clear that I needed to focus on the human element and the relationship between the individuals and the intimacy of the individual and nature. And so I portrayed Kala'au, who's an 11-year-old girl, in this piece. The piece is made of kapa through a very traditional method, which I have been studying, and it's important for me to continue to process the vauke in a traditional way. But I also have combine it with a colored pencil and embroidery representational image, which is not at all traditional. On the one side I have Ohia lehua represented, which is one of the most important ecologically and culturally significant species of the native Hawaiian forests. And so on the one side, on the right side, which is representing more hopefully the future, it's a hopeful, this piece is a hopeful image. It's meant to, it's a result of the hope that I took away from my experience in the forest. And Kala'au is a very special individual. I hope that Art will share more. She's holding ripe aiea fruit, which I stole from this caption of a photograph that Art had posted, rarer than gold. So the title of this piece is Rarer Than Gold, Kala'au with ripe aiea seed, fruit.
The forest is at such a point of loss when we got here that for it to be here in a century, it's going to have to be reborn in a way. And it will be reborn through people like Kala'au. Kala'au is Kala'au Kiokumalie. So she has rooted into the land, and she knows her native plants. She's free to identify them, or oh, that's a weed, or this is that. And so there's beauty in her. The other thing I'll say is that it's matched up with the ohia. And to me, the fact that the ohia is here, probably the most abundant native tree in Hawaii, and threatened by a disease that will decimate it. And so the question is, will the two of them be together again?
I feel like it's inspired a new body of work that I'm just at the beginning of, related to the human connection story with the land and identity and all of that. And I hope we work together again. I feel like we have access to each other in a way that who knows what will come from it, but I think only good things.